Hey guys, this is going to be a lot different from pretty much all of my other videos in that I'm just going to be talking over some Marauders B-roll, maybe a few screenshots in more of a rant style format. So yeah, Marauders has been one of my favorite games since some friends of mine showed it to me like about 2 years ago. And roughly a month ago, for the first time since purchasing the game, I actually uninstalled it. There wasn't anything in the game itself that made me do this. I still love the game at its core and think that even with its bugs and imperfections, it is an extremely rewarding and enjoyable experience. And what I'm about to talk about isn't meant to be a witch hunt for whose fault it is. I would imagine there's a lot of pieces in a very large puzzle that weren't fitting together for quite a while. So please don't harass anyone involved, as they likely have no control or any means to fix this situation. Like, they're just trying to do their jobs, and I totally get that. I'm just giving my perspective as a longtime player with over 800 hours. So let's go into why I uninstalled the game. It is now past the deadline that the Marauders team set for their most recent update, and in its place, we have only gotten crickets. Now, if this was a one-time deal and they said, hey guys, we're working on it, but it's going to take another 2 weeks, no problem, shit happens. The problem is that this is now becoming a trend with really terrible communication. We can see that back on July 14th of 2023, the team had announced a regular update schedule moving forward with small patches including content expansion, balancing, optimization, and social events every 2 weeks, with a larger update with new features every 8 weeks, with the expectation that they may need to hotfix or remove any bugs or exploits after these major patches, which is great, or was great, I thought. This mirrored very popular games like Rust that use a very similar model for their patches. And I hope that this would give Marauders the push it needed to really break through into the next echelon of extraction shooters. This was a pretty major continuation of the Excavation update, which had been released on July 4th of that year, just 10 days before. And I thought awesome at the time. I was really thinking that Marauders could be my go-to game. Things like this would help to mitigate the massive player dips in the player base that the game had seen in the past. At the latter month of July and beginning of August, the Steam page was live with posts regarding the roadmap and what to expect from wipes, and even touching on cosmetics in various dev blogs and other announcements. Things were really looking up. And then on August 3rd, we got another update called the Plunder Update. Here's where we got a new NPC and we got Raider mode. I'll touch on Raider mode again later, but the point is that they stuck to their schedule all through August with the Plunder 1.1 patch and Plunder 1.2 patches, making the rest of the month feel really full. September started off more or less the same, with a dev blog on the 6th and a small patch on the 14th. But then something strange happened. September 20th, the Marauders team released a dev blog with pictures from museums where they were looking for inspiration for future implementations for weapons, items, and overall cosmetics. Oddly, there were no mentions of incoming patches, but that was fine because we had the outline that they'd given to us, and it looked like they were doing something really cool, something exploring their passions for the game and for the era. But September came and went without the final patch coming as outlined by, well, themselves. Then October came and went without a word to the community. Finally, on November 15th, we got this. Quote, "We apologize for the lack of communication recently. However, we are undergoing a restructure which affects development, community support, and how we deliver updates. Unfortunately, we still do not have a set date for the guild's patch. However, we would like to take this opportunity to announce the launch of a PTE server." End quote. Now, this is strange for a number of reasons, but the player test environment felt extra strange. For those who don't know or don't play Marauders, the game is riddled with bugs. Most of them aren't game-breaking, but they're there nevertheless. When you load into the game, at the bottom of your screen, there's a big orange warning that lets you know that you're playing an unfinished game, so that you don't expect some polished AAA experience. And I think that's totally fair. I think it's a totally fair and viable way to set and manage expectations of an evolving project and product, so the bugs don't really bother me. Now, I'm not a game dev, but I kind of thought that we were playing on the PTE server because the game wasn't released yet. I thought that warning at the bottom sort of indicated that that was the case. I don't know why they did this, and it's not something I want to harp on too much because I'm sure they had their reasons. So moving on, we get nothing until December 1st, where we get the guild's playtest on their new PTE server. That is 2.5 months since their last update on the schedule as per their own outline. Looking back, I find it a bit funny that 2.5 months is about how long they were able to keep that schedule as well. Anyway, the guild's patch comes, and it was really the first patch that made me think, why? So in Marauders, you could already start a crew and have friends join you prior to the guild patch so that you can team up on the same ship when going into a raid. So what was really the point of the guilds thing? Really all it added was a weird patch mechanic that unlocked things to do in your hideout. The hideout was a copy and paste of the training facility in the Navy outpost with a few bits and bobs around it. Really, the only reason to implement something like this was for players to test things out and practice without having to worry about losing their gear. Not a bad thing by any means, but isn't something I imagine will bring new players into the game. To be fair, this patch brought a lot of good quality of life fixes, and the game just looked overall better. So on December 14th, we get the patch itself. Strangely, none of the major bugs which were present on the PTE server had been fixed, but whatever. A week later, on December 20th, they released a hotfix, which fixed a lot of these issues, not all of them, but then that was it. That was the last major patch since I released this video. That is nearly 6 months of nothing. The only real change was a very small patch on March 12th, where they said, quote, "This is primarily a small patch to attempt to fix the black screen issue that is occurring for some players when joining a match," end quote. Now, this black screen issue has been going on since the guild's patch. So, this is already 4 months down the line. And the worst part is that they didn't even fix the issue. The issue was still there even after the patch. On the plus side, they fixed an iron sight on a single gun in the game that same patch, so at least we got that, I guess? So what did they say since then? What did they say since December of 2023? Well, we got one dev blog on February 8th showing that they were working on yet another map, some new AI and cosmetics, collectible player cosmetics, and extending existing maps. Now, when I first saw this update, I didn't really like it. I made a video talking about how we didn't need another map or changes to existing maps, and like the guilds update, it seemed like a lot of time was being wasted on things that really didn't matter and really wouldn't improve the game itself or expand the player base. Now, I did delete that video because honestly it was just whiny and I didn't like the way it turned out, or just my take on it at the time I thought was a lot more visceral and emotional rather than kind of what I'm doing now. But I do still stand behind it, oddly enough, now that we're here, so I guess it is what it is. And it's something I'll kind of delve into more later. But the point is that on February 8th, we were shown diagrams of all this stuff, and yet here in May, we have gotten nothing but radio silence. Now this leads us directly into the numbers. Whether you use Steam charts or SteamDB or whatever, things are looking really grim for Marauders. If this player base was for a single player game, I wouldn't really think much of it. But time and time again, the team has been adamant that Marauders is designed to be a PvP experience. Again, I'm not a game dev, but I think you need an actual player base to accomplish that. 250 people playing around the globe means that even the biggest regions are in double digits for player count when they're peaking for that day. Some regions may even be less than that. I'll extrapolate from this why it's a problem later, but the maps feel like ghost towns, which leads me into why the last update announcement irked me a bit. Marauders has 9 major maps minimum, with each ship in the Rust Bucket and Scouts feeling like one map, the Red Baron ship being its own, the Interceptors and Cruisers, and finally the Capital ship, all being pretty extensive maps in and of themselves. The point being, Marauders has no shortage of maps, and they are all awesome. The sense of claustrophobia they instill while funneling players to meet where the loot is make for a really fun and unique experience, as does extracting back out through either your ship or the escape pods. So why are we getting yet another map? Don't get me wrong, it looks incredible, just like all the other maps do. But we just got a new map in the last big update, in the Planet Killer base. Either way, it's fine, it's cool, but it's largely irrelevant to what is holding this game back from being successful overall. Now, my second major problem with this were changes to the existing maps. Now, here I have to tie in the numbers issue with the issues in the player base. What is the point of a map if there are no players to fill it? Both on Reddit and in Discord, there's a loud minority of players who say things like, "I won't play until the airlock camping gets fixed," or "This game is awesome, but getting airlock camped makes the game unfun." Before I go any further, it is important for me to preface this by saying that these players are bad. They're not good at the game, and they aren't looking to improve or looking for a better experience. They're looking for an excuse. They want to have a reason that they aren't good at the game, and they want that reason to be something other than them. Because a lot of humans hate taking accountability, and the fact that the devs cater to this type of player is really not a good sign. I have died in my airlock a dozen times, and sometimes I win, and sometimes the people airlock camping me win. But 10 of 12 of those times have been because I was dilly-dallying outside of the map, not going in until several minutes after the game had already started, which makes the issue at hand largely a non-factor to the game itself. One of the coolest things about the airlocks opening in Marauders is the sense of fear it instills in you. It slowly rises and you have no idea what to expect on the other side. The lights in the airlock turn red, indicating to you that outside is danger, somewhere where you need to be on your toes. And it is awesome, and no other extraction shooter has anything like that. And the fact that a lot of the player base wants to take that away shows how out of touch they really are. And the fact that those types of posts get the most upvotes and the most attention really shows a giant disconnect in the actual player base who actually loves and plays this game. Now, I know this is the number section, so let's really talk numbers. According to a website called VG Insights, they show that Marauders has sold 587,000 units, which I believe is probably a fair, if not generous, estimate. If they sold all of these units at the $30 USD mark, which the game is currently at, that would be a total of $17,610,000. Now again, we know that the game has gone on sale multiple times, and this is likely way too high of an estimate. But again, we're trying to give them the benefit of the doubt, trying to be conservative here. Now on this site, they are showing the gross revenue for the game as 13.5 million USD. And already that's where I have an issue, because Steam has a 30% revenue share model, which means that even if Marauders sold every copy at the highest price mark before they got a dime, Steam is taking their cut of $5,283,000, leaving the Marauders team with only $12,327,000. Let's say that revenue is getting taxed at 30%. Now, what I found online is that in the UK and the US, you're getting taxed at roughly 35% if you're making over $1 million, but that's personal income tax. This would be a business, so let's assume they're getting taxed significantly less. So at that 30% mark, that is another $3,698,100, bringing that number down to $8,628,900. Now, taking in other factors like discounts, such as Steam sales, payroll, marketing, overhead, such as office rent, insurance, and utilities, server management, and then other expenses like travel and other intangible things. Now let's be generous and assume that that total is $2.5 million. So that leaves us at just over $6.1 million of actual profit. My opinion is that this is probably even still a bit too high, I'm not a finance or econ whiz. In fact, I hate math, but I love this game so much that I'm trying to understand what may be going on and what might be fueling some of the decisions at both Team 17 and Small Impact Games. So that gives them wiggle room of about $6 million before they actually hit the negative. But who wants to put their profit back into their business? The answer is no one. It's because businesses are about long-term sustainability, which means what we really need to look at is how much Marauders is making and potentially losing on a monthly basis. I found it pretty difficult to get an accurate number for how many copies of Marauders have been sold in, say, the past 6 months. I think it would be very charitable to assume that of the peak daily player count of 250, that many new players are purchasing the game every month. If they purchase at full price, we would multiply 250 by $30, which gives us $7,500 in monthly revenue, right? But wait, we know that at a minimum, they're already losing 30% of that right off the bat, which means we have to subtract $2,250 from that $7,500, which leaves us with $5,250. As far as monthly costs go, we can safely assume that they're paying $700 to $1,000 per month for servers. That might be a little bit high, it might be a little bit low. I'm not a server expert, so I think let's go ahead and assume it's right around the 1,000 mark. And then, because that might be high, let's bring it back down and be extra charitable with the overhead and say that their monthly overhead is only $1,000 per month, which would be insanely low. Just the office building alone, if they had one, would likely be way more than that, not to mention utilities and other factors, insurance, taxes, etc. But let's just go ahead and assume that it's $1,000 since we may be a little bit high for the servers. Now, for payroll, assuming each dev makes the minimum average income for a game developer, which is about $65,000 per year, that is $4,666 and change every single month for each developer, which means that if there are only 3 developers working on the game, their monthly payroll would be $14,000. If no one else was on that payroll, this total monthly cost would be roughly $16,000 every month. Now, I'm assuming these devs are working mostly on other games after the Team 17 acquisition, so I'm sure it's not a one-to-one as to how much revenue and time they're putting into Marauders. But I imagine that Marauders has been heavily in the red for at least 6 months. Now, throughout this video, it sounds like I've been harping on the Marauders team, but I just want to reiterate that I want this game to succeed. My interactions with the SIG team have been great. You guys are so supportive of your players and creators as individuals, so I want it to be known that I'm not knocking any of you individually. I want to take a quick moment and actually say thank you, and that I hope that it is understood that I made this video out of frustration with this situation as a whole, but more importantly because I love Marauders and its community. If the game stopped right now, I would have personally gotten my money's worth, but I really feel there is something special here that could push this game into the stratosphere if it gets the attention, time, and care that it deserves. I understand that the Marauders team is in a really tough spot because they need to cling on to the few diehard players who love the game while keeping it new and fresh enough to attract a larger player base. This creates a few major problems, and I'm honestly not sure how to bridge them, but I'd like to go over some possibilities. The first thing to address is player skill gap and outlook. The diehard players are naturally extremely good at the game, absolutely torching most casual players just picking the game up. Since the population is so small, these good players will very often be in the casual player games. Every game, maybe 2 if they're lucky. With 250 global players max, what do you even do about that? Do you segregate the player base by adding MMR or other distinguishers to keep good players from mopping up casual players? Would these lobbies fill up, or would that just push the player base down to 0? Well, they already implemented Breeder mode, which is a smaller 4-person game mode, which allows you to go in with a free kit, similar to Scav mode in Tarkov. This is to help players worried about making money or losing gear to keep a sustainable economy and hopefully lose some of their gear fear. I think it was a good idea overall and has been implemented really well. I haven't seen any effect on the main mode's queue times, so it could be that MMR could keep the casual players from rage quitting. Secondly, this game has a major issue for the skilled and diehard player base, in that apart from in-game currency or items, they have nothing to show for their skill, nothing to grind for. There are a couple of player kill cosmetics that are only able to be unlocked after you kill a certain number of Marauders, but that's about it. I think that more stuff like this, or some sort of ranking system, would go a long way for long-time players. This is somehow a controversial thing to say, it seems. If you were to look on Reddit or on the Discord, as a lot of players will say things like, the leaderboards and ranking systems promote toxic gameplay. Let me extend an olive branch to people with this outlook. Yes, people looking to top the leaderboards will play hyper-aggressive and look for player kills to progress through any systems of prestige like this. Now, let me retract that olive branch by saying, why don't you go cry about it in a corner? Marauders, by SIG's own admission and design, is supposed to be a PvPvE experience. This means the PvP should be the focal point of the game. The fact is, the player base was significantly higher when things like leaderboards and tournaments were in the game. Yes, some of the people on the leaderboards probably cheated, but even more of them didn't. There are cheaters in every game, such is life. It is what it is. I happen to have grinded to just above the top 50 by having a measly 1.75 KDA, so you didn't even have to be good to get there. Alright, let's recap and discuss things that I think could revitalize Marauders. Number 1, communicate. Let us know what's going on. Hell, maybe we could even help. Number 2, don't placate. Stop listening to the wrong players. People complaining about things like airlock camping should not get an entire patch dedicated to them, because anyone who complains about that doesn't even understand the fundamentals of the game itself. Either Marauders is a hardcore PvP experience, or it isn't. Just own it. Number 3, add grindable content. Add something for PvP-centric players to grind. Add distinguishers, or even MMR, or maybe a ranking system for players to grind to keep them away from newer players. If not this, bring back tournaments. They don't have to be all the time, but they would give PvP players something to play for. Also, I think adding more grindable cosmetics, especially player kill cosmetics, wouldn't hurt either. But what do you guys think? Am I being too harsh, or do some of these perspectives resonate with you as well? Do you have any ideas on how to improve the game? If so, I would love to hear your ideas in the comments down below. I try to read and respond to all of them. As always, I'm Crank Lopez, I have crippling attention deficit disorder, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.